Bank of America tested me this week. An hour and 42 minutes of being on the phone before they answered it. And by the time they answered it, I had gone through anger, frustration, lividness, self-righteousness, and finally peace. So by the time they answered, I was like, wait, you're interrupting my meditation here. Unfortunately, they always do this thing where they say about every 20 seconds, your call is very important to us. That's why we hired one person in India to handle the entire United States. For the people who were last week, any questions about the noting? Get those out of the way.
I tend to go around and go down, I think, oh, I'm sad. And then normally I would just sit with that. Get sadder and sadder, or, depressed. Or
Right.
And using this really brought me out of it. It was so cool.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. I really should charge you like $5,000 for that method.
Okay, well, I'll write it.
Because it's when you think about it, it really is worth at least that. Because if you use it and you can go from bummed out to feeling good in 3 minutes, that's better than, for the rest of your life, that's better than any vacation, any drug, any relationship. Because, a relationship will get you from bummed out to feeling good for a short period of time.
Some of the time.
What?
Some of the time.
Some of the time. But when you have a method that really works for the rest of your life, that can eliminate all depression, worry, and everything else in 3 minutes or less, it's astounding. People can't quite grasp that. And there's about 10 of those methods. So we will cover a couple more tonight. And I'm going to start, since most people are probably here, tell you a little bit about myself. Record this. Well, welcome. For those of you who weren't here last week, let me do a 40-second bio. My name's Jonathan Robinson, and I am an author and speaker, and I was a seeker, now I'm a finder. And I've been on Oprah and a lot of other shows, but what is more important is that I am not enlightened. I am just a regular guy who loves methods that really work. Recently I was trying to fix something on my garage, and I have a handsaw, which took about an hour of effort. And then a friend came over and he says, well, I got a circular saw. And it took about 4 seconds what I had spent an hour doing. And I said, one, I'm an idiot because I should get that kind of saw. And two, that's the use of a good tool, is if you have a good tool, you can do, some people struggle with depression or anxiety their whole life. They're taking pills, they're doing this, they're seeing therapists, they're spending thousands of dollars, they're taking drugs. And then they get a method in 3 minutes. It literally solves that forever. Now, unfortunately, I haven't figured out a way, the depression agencies sell these drugs, and they make about $20 billion a year in America. So they have a lot of money to convince you that the best way to deal with all your negative feelings is to take a pill. Now, being I'm a psychotherapist, I know that those pills actually have zero effectiveness with 93% of people. They have, according to Harvard Medical School, zero effectiveness with 93% of people. Yet people sacrifice lots of time, energy, and money doing that because we've been sold a bill of goods. And we are easily manipulated by people to think that this is the way to happiness, have the right relationship, look a certain way, blah, 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 make money. And yet, if you made it here, you already know that happiness and peace is within you, but the methods you've been using probably are 2,000 years old. How many people are using an iPhone from 2,000 years ago? Nobody's using an iPhone, the new one came out today. Anybody have the original iPhone? If you had the original iPhone, it looks like a hockey puck. Nobody has it, and that's 10 years ago. And things have changed so much that nobody has the original iPhone. But we're using methods from 2,000 years ago, and they're completely ineffective. Not completely ineffective, they will work, just like that hand saw will work. Except most people nowadays have a very short attention span, and if a method doesn't work in 3 minutes or less, it's usually not going to work for you in daily life. So I'm a collector of good methods, and I like to share them. My favorite method, actually, I will be giving next week, because it takes exactly 1/2 of a second. Which is a method that takes 1/2 a second, I can use 50 times a day. That's 25 seconds of effort. And when I use it 50 times a day, it totally changes my life in 25 seconds of effort. Now, it's a somewhat advanced method, and it'll take me a good half hour to describe it. But once you get it the first time, it takes exactly 1/2 a second of effort. Now, the method today, that I'm going to give a couple methods today, and these are 3-minute methods, meaning at first they will take a full 3 minutes. And I apologize because I have a thing where I do not teach methods that take longer than 3 minutes. Now, that's at the beginning, but with a little bit of practice, you can get these methods down to maybe 20 seconds. And that's where it can really impact your life. And they've done studies that show that if something takes under 20 seconds of effort, people will do it even if it doesn't make them feel good, even they'll do it a lot. TV takes less than 20 seconds of effort. They've actually done studies when they have remotes that are a little bit more difficult, and if it takes 30 seconds or more versus 20 seconds, people's TV viewing goes down 2 hours a day, because those extra 10 seconds they're not willing to do. So you want to see really what your abilities are. I told you last week I'm pretty lazy, and that has helped me to get focused on these types of things. Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you're advocating to do something a whole bunch of times a day, when maybe I'm thinking that just doing it twice or 3 times a day is sufficient, and I feel happy, and I'm just
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
So, well, 20 times a day or 25 times a day.
You don't have to do it 20. You don't have to do it 20 or 25 times a day. It becomes a habit after a while. Think of it like a dopamine hit, or a hit of something that makes you feel good. That if it is that easy and it makes you feel good, then you might do it more just because it's fun.
So you're still saying that it's a good thing to do something more. You're still saying more times is better. You see what I mean? And I don't know if I agree with that. And
You don't have to. Yeah, everybody's different. Everybody's different. So really, my job, as I see it, is to give you tools to find out what works for you and what makes your life more joyous and more aware. So one of the things I did last week was I defined what awareness is. Because what really I think changes people's lives is going from this person that we've all experienced, and I experienced this too, where you're a congested ball of thoughts and negative feelings. That's most people's experience most of the time. And then you also know what it's like to take a couple of those layers off and be more like, yeah, I feel good. That's a pretty natural state. But we don't necessarily know how to go from the first to the second in 20 seconds. Once you learn that skill, your life does change. But then, can you go from feeling pretty good to feeling, well, it depends on how high you want to go. Currently, I like to feel one with the universe. As I said, I'm a bliss junkie. And I find that right now it generally takes me about 2 to 3 minutes to do that. What makes a spiritual teacher is somebody who can do that in 2 seconds. Okay, I've interviewed a lot of spiritual teachers, and they say, no, I don't live in an LSD merged with all of reality state. It's about 2 seconds away. So that's what makes a Krishnamurti, a Ramana Maharshi, a Adyashanti, people like that. And you don't even have to be a particularly good person or moral person. It's really more like a skill that can be developed. And yet we have all these ideas around it that keep us from seeing that it's really a skill. Now, one of the skills involved is being able to get through negative emotions quickly. Because when we get caught in negative emotions, things get very, very dense and very, very difficult very, very quickly. Just looking at some notes here. So at our core, we are pure awareness. Now, to me, pure awareness is a place of total peace, total openness, total love, and it also feels very impersonal. Babies demonstrate pure awareness, so it can't be that hard. But we get locked in all these stories and such that keep us from that. We get into feeling that we are a somebody doing something, and that we have all these burdens and problems that we have to deal with. It's like being on a treadmill that's going pretty quick. You know, we're on a story treadmill. Right now you have a story. Right now I have a story. The story is we're attending a lecture. I'm a spiritual seeker attending a lecture. That's one story. I'm a certain age with a certain amount of health and a certain amount of wealth. That's another story. And then there's these stories of our problems, which are always going on in our head, and we identify with all of them. You know, just think of one of your story problems. I have a story that's bothering me now. We have a moth infestation in my house.
Those food moths.
Yeah. I know! It's horrible! And I've been battling these moths for like weeks now. And now I've developed a story. It's hopeless. There's nothing that can be done. I'm going to be burdened by moths for the rest of my life. This is the story I got going. Now, the funny thing about stories is that they all sound totally real inside our head. And we all feel kind of what I would call uniquely screwed. Not that we're screwed, we're just uniquely screwed because I'm the only one that is dealing with this moth infestation that just won't go away. So I'm uniquely screwed. And you can't understand my story, you just haven't been there. So we pay therapists to listen to our story. Hopefully they will understand. So we all have this story going on, and we have some of us have 10 layers of stories. You know, my loved one left me. I have to deal with the political situation going on. I have money. I don't have money. I have a friend whose story is, I have way too much money. I'm so uniquely screwed. And he really believes that story. Have you ever been with somebody, they're telling you the story, you know, and they expect total empathy, but you're thinking, that's really a lousy story. Talking to a friend recently, and I said, he has a private jet, and I said, how was your flight? And he said, oh, it was really bad. The air conditioning on the jet was just really way too high. And that was his story in that moment. It didn't sound good to me, as other people's stories often don't sound good to us. But in our head, they all make sense, and we don't have a good way to get through that layer. Because in reality, we are making up all the stories all the time. We are pure awareness. We actually experience life one iota of a second at a time where there's really nothing happening. 99% of life is this. You might be staring at a screen doing that. You might be looking out at nature. You might be listening to somebody. But it's basically just this. And then every now and then you talk or do something. But we create these incredible stories that we believe that develop a momentum, that develop negative emotions, that develop a solidity that all prevent us from experiencing pure awareness. So let me describe what pure awareness is. I'm sure most of you have experienced it, but it's actually very subtle at first, and then it becomes screamingly loud. So pure awareness, I'll make, this could be actually a meditation if you want. I'll talk about it for 2 or 3 minutes. And it can actually be a meditation because when you describe something, it can help you to get back there. I call this spiritual pornography. We are describing something, hopefully that it will excite the part of you that remembers this experience. So awareness is the background of all your experience. You cannot not be aware. But for most of us, it's tainted almost all the time by our thoughts and judgments. Judgments are not awareness, that's an add-on. Feelings are not awareness. Awareness is aware of your feelings. Awareness is aware of your judgments. Awareness is your senses taking in information without the filter of ego or story. Awareness is something that lives only in the present. It has no form or shape, but it's always in the background, just like air is always in the background. And you can become aware of the air around you, but normally we're not aware of it. It's because air is like the container of everything, and awareness is the container of everything. Now, what is really interesting is if you can stay close to awareness long enough, you start to realize it has other properties. It feels incredibly peaceful. It is also a doorway to another realm. It's like a portal. And in that portal, you start to see that it is a portal to energy. You could call it God, love, vibration, pure experience. Now, because it doesn't have a form and you can't grasp at it, we need methods to help us to attend to it because it's invisible unless you learn how to make it more visible. You can't store it because it only exists in the exact moment. But you can learn how to look for it and to open and make it more prevalent in your experience. And when you do, your stories go away and you enter into an eternal now. Some call that eternal now silence or stillness. Sometimes people call it spacious. And as you get more into it, you experience it being connected to everything. But that's getting a little far out. So the question is, how do we turn our minds out from looking at the world of forms and stories and thoughts and judgments to this thing which is the container for all of that? Well, the Buddha came up with some methods 2,500 years ago, and they were the iPhone of the day. And Jesus came up with some methods that were also useful, and they also can be helpful. There are no good or bad methods. There are methods that I would say work for you and don't work for you. So the question is, try a lot of methods and see what seems to work for you. And eventually a master tool user knows when to use this method and knows when to use this method. I prefer methods where you don't have to separate yourself from life, at least not for long, especially in modern day life. So I'll tell you a story about one of my first experiences awakening. I went to India and met this guru, not the one you heard last week, but He had a method, Ramana Maharshi's method, which was asking people, who are you? You've probably heard of that method. And I hadn't heard of the method, so I traveled to Lucknow, India, and there's about 50 people, about a room this big, and as I walk in, he points to me, he says, you, sit here. Okay, I don't know really what's going on. And big bald-headed guy, a guy named Papaji, pretty famous guru. And he looks at me for a while, and he goes, who are you? I didn't really know what the protocol here was, so I said, I'm Jonathan Robinson from the United States. And he and everybody else in the room busted up laughing. It was like the funniest thing they had ever heard. He had like tears of laughter going down his face. And I feel completely humiliated, and I don't know what's going on. Finally, he said, no, who are you really? I said, I'm a spiritual seeker. And he just goes. And then I say, I'm a writer. He goes. Then I say, I'm a man. I'm just spewing things out now, hoping something sticks after a while, but nothing's sticking. And I do this for like 3 minutes. And I just ran out of identities or stories. So then I noticed, once I had run out of all these stories, I actually became present. I noticed that there was, his eyes light was coming out of them. And I thought, that's really interesting. There's actually light coming out of this guy's eyes. And I just kind of became fascinated with it. And then there was a stillness. And then I entered into this place which I call pure awareness, where I realized that I was connected to him, he was connected to me, that there was this watcher, we'll call it, that had always been there. And this realization hit me so strong that I started to feel overwhelming love, and it kept building, and then I started crying. And other people in the room started crying, and then I realized I don't know what I'm crying about, and that struck me as very funny, so I started laughing and crying. And as I'm feeling all this love, this man pats me on the head, and he says, this love is who you are, and your job is to not forget that. So that has always stayed with me, that that's our job. You may think that you're a writer or an accountant or whatever, but your job, you're born here on earth, given a certain job, and that is to wake up to this love and peace, which is always here. Now, luckily, the methods are getting better as we get a shorter and shorter attention span. In 2002, Microsoft did a study and found that Americans' attention span averaged 14 seconds. And then in 2010, they did the same study, same exact tests, and found out it had gone to 8 seconds. And now, last year they did it, and it's now 6 seconds. So by the way, goldfish have an attention of 9 seconds, attention span of 9 seconds. So our attention span now is less than a goldfish. But God, or grace in its infinite wisdom, realizes that we have limited abilities. So these methods can work even though we have the attention span of a goldfish. So let me go into the first method, and then we'll answer questions, we'll practice it, and you'll see if this method works for you. The first method is this question. I have it here, and some of you haven't gotten the handout. I'll give it to you in a little bit. It says, what's my story method? And the method is, when you're upset, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? Now, you can do it when you're not upset as well. What story am I telling myself right now? Now, sometimes that story is very dense. Like, I told you about my experience with Bank of America this week. Bank of America is, I am being screwed by Bank of America again, and these people don't give a hoot about anybody or anything, and I shouldn't have to deal with this stuff. That's a pretty dense story. And I'm living that story. And when you're living that story, you feel self-righteous, you feel angry, you feel like you're being uniquely screwed. So I asked myself, what's the story? And I spelled out the story. You know, if I was a character in a play, I'd be like that person on the phone, I've been waiting here for an hour. What's your problem? Right? I could really feel that character. And I said, I asked myself, once I got clear on what story I was living, I asked myself the second question, which here is, what would be a more empowering story? I thought about that, and I said, well, a more empowering story is that God, in her infinite kindness, knows I have a problem with waiting and not being served on immediately, and is helping me to overcome this weakness in character by having me have an abnormally long wait as I try to reach Bank of America. And if I can take this difficulty and know how to let go of the story and get to awareness, that would be a really beneficial boon to me. Now, which story is true? Doesn't really matter. We're making it all up. But one story was certainly more empowering than the other story. And that led me to then do the mental noting technique that we used. And within 3 minutes, I was in a state of bliss. And then I was just hanging out in bliss. And by the time a person answered the phone about 40 minutes later, I was like, oh, shoot, okay. And in fact, the woman said, it was funny, because I'd never heard a Bank of America employee say this before. She said, we've been very busy, and according to our records, you've been on hold for over 90 minutes. I said, yeah, that's true. And she said, are you on drugs? She said, you're so pleasant and relaxed. Normally, when I finally answer somebody, they're like, the first 3 minutes I have to deal with their screaming. I said, no, I'm not on drugs, just been kind of waiting, enjoying the wait. And she then said, you're on drugs, aren't you? We had a very pleasant conversation, and she was actually able to do what I requested. But, you know, it's always good to come up with a better story, a story that's lighter, that might even lead you into practicing the presence of peace. Now, what I like about this story is you're always in a story. Right now I'm in the story that I am presenting and have to entertain you, or I have to keep you engaged. That's a little bit of a burden. Then I could come up with a more empowering story. I can just be myself, and you can get what you will get, and it doesn't really matter. I can speak my truth for me, and maybe that will lead to you getting something valuable. So it can be used for big things, big stories, heavy stories, or it can be used for really small identities where, gee, I feel really good, but ultimately the story is that you are who you think you are. You might think you're Carol, but in reality, you're pure awareness manifesting through Carol's body. You, on the other hand, really are Michael. No. You are awareness manifesting through Michael's body in this moment. See, really, the past is just a thought. The future is completely made up. We only live this moment at a time. Everything else is a story. And some people, I mean, you see some people, their story is, oh, I've been depressed for 10 years and nothing ever works out and everything in my life is horrible and people hate me. Like, I mean, you know, there's a lot of layers there. The great news is you can do something like mental noting, which I taught last week, or this method that I'll be doing today. And with the right method, you can go through all 27 layers in 3 minutes or less. But it helps to have this very simple thing. So what we're going to do in a moment is we're going to have you pair up, and you're going to share with your partner your answer to those two questions. You know, the story I got, just saying the story I got running in my head, or the story I'm telling myself now, automatically distances you from the story. It helps you to disidentify with your story when you label it. In fact, it kind of takes the juice out of it a lot of the time. You know, it just kind of, you know, like if you, it just takes like a little bit of urine to ruin an entire glass of water, you know? Almost none, one drop, and no, I'm not drinking that, right? And it's kind of, this is a gross analogy, but it's kind of like just a little bit of awareness, and you just can't quite get the juice you did before with a lot of stories. And the more awareness you have, the more it just kind of decimates the story. So it's very simple. You know, you'll pair up, and if I was doing this for Veronica, you'd say, so what's the story you got running currently?
Chair's uncomfortable.
Chair's uncomfortable. Yeah, it's a great story. I'm uniquely screwed because this chair is uncomfortable. I shouldn't have to put up with this stuff. That's enough to keep you busy, really, right? And then you can say, what would be a more empowering story?
Well, it's interesting that I don't have strong enough muscles to hold myself up, and I'm depending on this chair. I have an opportunity to work on that.
Yeah, I can now work on strengthening my back muscles and sitting up straight. And, you know, or I can see the pain helps bring me back to the present. Pain is good for that. If you don't have a story about it, it's like, oh, that sensation could be a reminder. Yeah.
What about lists of things you just need to do? Is that really a story?
Well, it depends how you present these lists to yourself. If you have the story, which most people do, is, oh God, I have so much to do in so little time. That's the story a lot of people are running in their head continuously. I have so much to do in so little time. So it creates this busyness, this character that's very busy all the time. Now, that story would prevent you from seeing clearly that life always happens one moment at a time, that nothing is earth-shattering and that critical, and it would prevent you from being relaxed enough to experience spaciousness. So you may have, we all have our list, but what story do you create around it? And the story of like, I have to hurry, that story is invisible in this culture because 99% of the people have it. So you start to get to more and more subtle stories. The most subtle stories are the ones that are completely invisible to us. Like I used to always be in a hurry. Always. I didn't know I was in a hurry because that's, you know, this, like, of course you have to be in a hurry because I have a lot to do. When I started to become aware of that story, I said, actually, I can let go of being in a hurry for the next 10 seconds and the world won't explode. I would take what I call 10-second vacations. I'm going to do absolutely nothing for 10 seconds. Let's try it now. Try to do nothing for 10 seconds. You got into your meditation posture when I said that. I said, do nothing for 10 seconds. She goes, You can do nothing just how you were sitting. You don't have to do something to do nothing. That's the great thing about doing nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to pair up, and one person will say the story I got running is, a more empowering story would be, and then you'll switch. And after you're done doing that, we'll talk about how to take that even farther. Okay?
Question.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This method seems to be for mostly problematic or unpleasant stories. Suppose you have a pleasant, nice story going on. You want to change that story?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, unpleasant stories are a good place to practice because you get immediate benefit. You know, nobody wants to stay with an unpleasant story, but you're welcome to do pleasant stories. With pleasant stories, you're still running a story. So I'd say first start with unpleasant stories, but pleasant stories are fine to use, especially if you, in doing this or other techniques, it takes you to a deeper, more peaceful, more aware place. I tend not to like to ruin my pleasant stories. So I tend to just do it with my unpleasant stories unless I'm really trying to go deeply within. And then I think, okay, what's my current story? Could I let that go? And we'll talk about letting stories go in another method after we do this exercise. So pair up with somebody and do this. I'll tell you when to come back, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Anybody have any questions or share what that was like? Yeah.
A more empowering concept is difficult for me because it involves severe pain.
Uh-huh.
So it was hard for me to climb out of the physical sensation
Yeah.
and find something where I wasn't sort of gritting my teeth and going, well, I suppose I could be learning. So I found that the physical discomfort was very distracting.
Yeah, physical pain is a tough one. I have a friend that has spent the last 22 years in intense, the nerves of his spine are in continuous like, you know, whatever you call that. So it's intense pain all the time. And he's one of the more enlightened people I know. And he says the reason he's at this level of consciousness is because anytime he goes out of the present moment for even a second, he gets intense pain. So he's like very grateful for this unique burden. And not that I would ever want that burden, and it's a tough one. But at one time, 20 years ago, I did have intense back pain. And the story I came up with after I realized my story was that I was unlucky, I was uniquely screwed, and etc., was that I am going to learn a lot about pain and backs that will be useful sometime in my life. And I went to 23 different practitioners and eventually found somebody who helped. And now I do get to talk to people, and I sometimes help people through their physical pain, which I also have compassion for, having gone through that. So it ends up a lot of my created story came true. So think of it that when a woman is having a baby, she is experiencing about the most intense pain possible. I don't know from personal example, but that's what I hear.
I remember it. It's true.
But a lot of women would say that was a very wonderful experience, one of the best experiences of their life, even though because the story that went along with it created a context. Now, the same woman going through the same amount of pain and rape is obviously going to have a totally different experience. So the story that we put on our exact moment-to-moment sensations is actually, in my opinion, much more important than the actual sensations. So that can be a doorway where you see, okay, whatever I'm telling myself, can I create a context for that story that will either soften it or move me forward in ways that I think are productive? And it's a real challenge when it comes to physical pain. Good question. Any other questions?
John,
Yeah.
were you saying that your friend who was in constant pain, like when he was experiencing like the present moment, that he didn't actually feel the pain? Is that what you?
No, he feels the pain,
Okay,
but he calls it pure sensation,
okay,
which is different than suffering.
okay.
And therefore, he says when he experiences pure sensation, it is absolutely tolerable, although not what he likes. But when he comes up with a story and goes into the self-pity and the whole thing, it becomes intolerable. Yep. So let's start on the next method. Oh, and before I do that, if you were not here last week, I want you to give me your email address in case I have to contact you if had to tell you something changed or something like that. If you were here last week, don't fill this out. But if you were not, write down your email address. So the main event tonight is talking to you about. I want to talk to you about a method called, I call it bouncing Sedona. How many people here are familiar with the Sedona Method? Okay. I know Hale and Droskin and Larry Crane, and they came up, and a guy named Lester Levinson came up with this thing called the Sedona Method. And I've studied it for probably about 800 hours over the last few years. And I use it a fair amount, but as I practiced it, I found that there was a better way of doing it that worked for more and more people than the Sedona Method. The Sedona Method is a good method, and it's good on many levels. It helps people go from negative emotions to peace very quickly. And it can also be a very spiritual method. And in fact, the guy who created it, a guy named Lester Levinson, not only became a fully realized being using it, but he also healed himself. He was given less than 2 weeks to live after having experienced a couple of intense heart attacks. And the doctor said, there's nothing we can do for you. Just go home and die, and hopefully you'll last over a week. But don't count on it. And he started to do this method he created. And within 6 months, he was running 20 miles a day. And within 8 months, he was a fully realized being. Pretty good for a method, right? And he lived 47 more years.
His name was Larry.
His name was Lester Levinson.
I see.
He did die in 1995. Very amazing, wonderful being. And as with a lot of methods, there's many layers to it, and I have probably been in 300 or 400 hours of instruction of it, but the essence of it really comes down to something I can teach in 10 minutes. And it's just a question of whether you get good at that. Now, I found that by adding a couple of steps, most people could experience going from, I'll call it a level 8, 9, or 10 of upset. 10 is, well, let's say 8 or 9. 10 is, hopefully we don't have to deal with that. But, in a given week, we might experience a level 8 or 9 upset. Somebody bashes into your car. That's a level 9 upset probably. Or you're on hold at Bank of America for an hour and 42 minutes. That's a level 7 upset. Or a business deal goes bad. Those things happen each week. And how do you keep that from taking over your mind and emotions? And the Sedona Method generally can take you from a level 7, 8, 9 upset to 0 or 1 or 2 within 3 minutes. Very consistently. with no practice, immediately. With practice, you get better at it. But even the first time, I actually teach meditation and some of these methods in prison. And the first time these prisoners, who are not model meditators, were able to use it, I asked them, what level upset did you have before? And the average was an 8. And then after 3 minutes of doing the method, what level? And the average was 2. If you can go from 8 to a 2 in 3 minutes, the first time you use it, that's going to change your life if you use it a lot. With practice, you can go from a level 8 to actual bliss in about a minute. That's about where I'm at currently, but I've been at this for a few years. So let's talk about it. I give very good instructions, but I think it's going to help for me to read through this and answer any questions as we go through it. I call it the full release method because it's a little bit different than the Sedona method. First step is notice when you're having a negative emotion and or thoughts that have been going on for a while or making you feel stuck. And in fact, I want you, as I describe this, to actually do it. So think of something that's been bothering you. Don't make it the worst trauma of your life, but something that really is bothering you. Second step is to welcome whatever your current experience is. So I want you to try it right now. Think of something that's bothering you and just let it be there. Take a moment, come up with that. And in fact, on a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being very upset and 1 being you feel totally peaceful and blissed out, how much can you get in touch with that upset? Just come up with a number. Good. Now, the first step of this is to really welcome the experience you're having. Normally, we resist our experience, but I want you to just welcome the anxiety, welcome the images, welcome the depression, welcome the not fairness of it. Just like you just inhabited this body and you're welcoming these unique sensations. Right now, I'm experiencing back pain, so I'm going, what does back pain feel like? Oh, yeah. And imagine you're welcoming it like an old friend. I've had back pain for a lot of years. It is an old friend. When we resist, things persist. When you welcome things, just the act of welcoming can actually change stuff. So you welcome whatever's there, allow it to be there. The next step is our negative emotions result from wanting something. Like, I don't want the back pain there. I'd like it to be gone. But Lester Levinson came up with this idea that we're always wanting one of 4 things. And if you label what category the thing that you want is, that is an interesting technique. And he called the categories control, I mean, I'd like more control, or I'd like more approval and love, or approval. I'd like more security, or I'd like more separation. Separation means that you want to blame somebody or feel better than them. All of life's suffering can fit into one of those 4 categories.
Where does pain fit? Control?
Pain would be control, yeah. Although different things, it could be security depending upon how you related to it, but most of the time it would be control. So you notice that what's causing my suffering is I'm wanting control that I don't have. Or I'm wanting this person's approval, and I don't have it. Or I'm wanting security. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough security. Or whatever it is. Okay. So you figure out the category, and then you ask yourself, so you figure out the category, and it's not that important that you get the category just perfect. but it is helpful because it's much easier to let go of something specific than to just let go. So then you go into step 3, and we're not going to do this quite yet, but I'm going to explain it. You stand up and you bounce up and down on your toes for 15 seconds. The reason you're doing this is because what happens is we get stuck energy in our body. Negative emotions are like stuck energy. So right now, I'm feeling a fair amount of back pain. And if you don't move it through, it just stays there and you think, you come up with a story and it's not fair and the universe hates me, blah, blah, blah. But instead, I might just do this. This just moves energy through your body. So I'm doing this. And then I think, okay, I'm wanting more control. And I ask the question, could I let go of wanting control just for right now? I don't have control. I might as well let go of wanting it. Now, you can't want something and have it at the same time. So you can't, just like you can't sit down and stand up at the same time. If you're wanting something, if you're desiring it, you can't actually have it. So I say, could I, just for right now, let go of wanting control over the sensations that are uncomfortable? Sometimes I'll even put a time limit on it. Could I let go of wanting control just for 20 seconds? I was recently hurt by somebody that I care about, or that was my interpretation of it. I was feeling sad. I wanted her approval, and I wasn't getting it. And I was starting to come up with a story. She shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. You know how that goes. And I said, could I let go of wanting her approval just for 20 seconds? First I got the energy moving. Could I let go of wanting her approval, chasing after her approval, just for 20 seconds? It felt so good to let go of wanting her approval. I wasn't getting it anyway, so I might as well let go of wanting it. And it felt like this big burden being released. Now, once you let go of wanting something and you feel that peace underlying it, often you don't want to grab it back so quickly, because that just feels terrible. So it's a trick of the mind in a way to say, could I let go of it just for right now? And once I let go of wanting it, I felt the underlying peace. And then I often ask, could I let go even some more? Now what makes our muscles work is when I contract my hand, that's a useless thing unless I know how to open it. If you had a hand that just contracted and you couldn't open it, you don't have a hand anymore. You just have a stump. So the ability to let go of tension is key, but we are never taught how to let go of tension. And that is a skill. How do you let go? So this is a way to strengthen that muscle, that letting go muscle. And you also let go of needing security in this moment, or needing to feel separate in this moment. And then I often ask, could I let go some more? And eventually you learn what that is like in your body to let go. Now sometimes there's things that can help, like the shaking helps. This is how animals let go. Watch your dog when something happens. They shake. So another thing that can help is a deep breath, or sometimes sounds help. Sometimes they'll go, ah. Now babies are good at letting go. What do babies do? They shake, they cry, they do all of this, right? And they can go from livid to happy in a minute. Their parents can't do that. So that's something that you can do. You can shake, you can make sounds. I find that yawning helps. I will often, as I'm letting go of something, yawn several times, and that works, and babies do that as well. So I'm going to guide you through this, but once you let go of something, then it's useful to replace it with something else. A good feeling. So the last step is I think of a person or animal that I have great affection for, and I think about a wonderful time with them. So in a moment, I'm going to guide everybody to doing this all together, and we'll see how it goes. Ready? Okay. So you did the first step, and once again, I want you to get in touch with the thing that was bothering you as best you can. You're already releasing through the, sometimes as I talk about this, people realize, oh, I've been holding this, and they start to automatically yawn and release and sometimes make sighing sounds. That's good. So you know what category this thing falls into. Now I want you all to stand up. And think of it that you're going to do whatever you think helps you to release. For different people, it's different things, and you want to experiment. For me, I found that yawning works fantastic. For other people, it's stretching. For some people, it's making sounds. For some people, it's bouncing up and down, just going like this. But we're going to start doing that. And after about 20 seconds doing that, I'm going to say, ask yourself, could I let this go just for now? And that will be a cue for everybody to be quiet and just stand there and let go as best they can. Okay? And then I'll guide you from there. So think of the thing that's upsetting you. Feel it. And then do whatever you can to just kind of move that energy through. Good. Now ask yourself, could you let this go just for now? Could you let it go just for now and feel the energy of peace and presence in this moment? Notice any tightness in your body or tightness in your spirit, and ask yourself, could you let it go even more? Could you allow it to be just as it is without you having to figure anything out? Now, could you think of a person or animal you have great affection for, and remember a special time with that being? And could you feel your connection to that being in a way that warms your heart? Could you imagine holding or hugging them or telling them how much they mean to you in a way that expands your heart and gives you a sense of gratitude? And on the 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being very upset and 1 being very peaceful and loving, give yourself a number as to where you're at right now. And when you're ready, you can have a seat. So a quick question, how many people improved at least 4 or 5 in that step? Raise your hand if you've improved 4 or 5. Okay. Now the first time you use a method is the time that you are the worst at it. So if you improved 5 steps, the first time you play tennis, you're horrible. And you improve 5 steps in 3 minutes the first time you used it. With practice, you get better at it, and it gets quicker. Now, a shorthand way of using this method is could I let go of this thing that's bothering me just for 20 seconds? And you learn what is that thing in you that tightens around negativity and problems, and you learn to just let it go pretty well with practice. And then you learn the second step, which was really a heart-opening exercise. So you fill the void left by now being present with a good feeling. And that kind of inoculates you a little bit from negativity. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, I know that the way my mind works, it kind of repeats loops over
Yeah.
and over again. So, yes, I feel like I'm down at a 1.
Uh-huh.
And I also am sure that in not too long, I'll be right back in the story.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how often I would be needing to shake in the middle of my day.
Yeah. Well, some of these issues, like say the issue of wanting people to like you, that's very deep in human beings. You're not going to, unless you're Ramana Maharshi, you're not going to say, I let it go, and then you become one with God and it never comes back. How long it is before it comes back or you need to shake again is different for different people in different situations. But with practice, you do get better at letting things go more quickly. And it really depends. I would say it's like a table that has a lot of legs, and you're kicking out the legs. Eventually, the table collapses. So each person that you want approval from is like a table in that leg, and it's holding up the whole leg of, I want you to like me, which is how most people go through life. But if you kick out enough of those legs, one by one, soon you don't quite take it so seriously. It doesn't stay as long. It's not as solid. And the thing and the ground level being where the table rests becomes more real to you. The state of simple present time awareness becomes more palatable and more obvious. But it does take time, but there's a sense that you're making progress along the way. And progress feels really good. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I like what you said about where is that place in me that tightens. You said that afterward because I found the exercise really wasn't helpful at all. The minute I thought about that thing, I was right back in that exact same place.
Uh-huh.
The only way that I wasn't is if I thought about something else.
Mm-hmm.
So to think about it in terms of letting go in a more indirect way seems interesting. Because if I think directly about the thing, I'm immediately right back in that same place.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say that different things work for different people. And if you immediately are full back at the 8, 9, 10 when you think about this, then you can ask questions like, where is that tightness? And could I welcome that tightness first? Because what you resist persists. And then once it's fully welcome, could I let it go? So you just go into this pattern of getting more precise as to maybe where it is in your body. That's one way of doing it.
The result of the thing.
Yeah. Another way of doing it is to ask yourself this question, well, what's aware of that? Where you're feeding the awareness part of it. So there's a lot of different, it does take some trial and error to learn what works for you. So when I feel really stuck, I'll say, and what's aware of that? To try and bring me back to awareness, because awareness is a little bit like yeast in a cake. It only takes a little bit to make that cake. But without yeast in a cake, you have matzah. You don't have a cake. You have a flat nothing. So you want to find out what is your yeast and how can you bring a little bit of that awareness in rather quickly. Good questions. Any other questions? Yeah.
In the beginning, the probably most difficult part for me is accepting, welcoming negative.
Yeah.
What I did was I was a single parent for 17 and a half years. My son's mother literally left him on my doorstep 2 blocks from here. He moved 10 years from now, 10 years back, and now his mother is a born again Christian, which is we don't get that one right now.
Well, let me direct what you're saying. 'Cause I want to help you in this moment.
Go ahead, please.
When you get too far into a story, it just builds it and makes it harder. So in this moment, there's pain around this, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So try this with me right now, if you're willing to. So what emotion would you say is the primary emotion you're currently experiencing over this?
Well, pain. But do you mean, am I looking for power or control, or?
No, I'm saying more like you feel depressed, you feel angry, you feel frustrated, you feel livid, you feel...
I'm with all of those right now.
But what would be a primary one?
I think it's pain.
Okay. So is the pain evenly distributed in your body? Do you feel in your toes as much as other places?
Heart.
Okay, heart. Good. Now, in reality, what you're feeling are sensations, right?
Yes.
You interpret those sensations to be pain, to be certain feelings, then there's a story around that. But the way emotions hit us are moment by moment sensations. And these sensations you don't like. That's what pain is. Are you following me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to, normally what we do when we feel pain is we resist against it. We try to push it away. You're, what, in your 40s?
I'm 50.
50, okay. So you have a 50-year experiment to know what it's like to push things away. You know what that does. Let's try a 5-minute experiment to do something else. So right now, as you feel those sensations, when I say welcome, you're not saying I like them. You're saying I accept them. I'm allowing them to be there. I'm not going to push them away just for like a minute. Okay? And even to get curious about them. Like, imagine that I'm from another planet and I don't know what pain is for humans, and you have to describe. Tell me, this pain, is it constant or is it kind of come and go?
It comes and goes.
Okay. Is it like this big or is it bigger?
It's bigger.
Bigger. Is the boundary always the amount, like a very exact boundary, or is it a kind of nebulous boundary? It's okay. And does it, what about the pain makes it something that you really don't like?
The amount of time that it takes, the amount of time that I put into...
No, I mean in this second, because there is no time. Right now, it's just hitting you 1 second at a time. So in this second, what about it do you find so like intolerable?
section of my life that I put into it that's coming back and hitting me.
Yeah, but that's a story. I'm talking about in this moment, there's a certain sensation in this area, right?
Okay.
In this moment, as you focus on what that sensation is, do you enjoy it?
No.
No. Why? What about it is not enjoyable as a sensation in this moment?
There's nothing I can do about it.
Okay, but that's also a story in time. In this moment, like if somebody does this to me, I like that sensation, it feels pleasant. If somebody does this, I go, oh, that hurts. I feel a burning sensation right now. So does it feel burning?
No.
Okay. If you only had a slice of moment of 1 second now, would you say that the sensations that are hitting you in this second are completely ridiculously intolerable, or I can be with for this second?
They can be ridiculously intolerable.
Okay, but not can be. I'm saying in this second, as you feel that, that's how reality hits us. Everything else is our story around it. So what I'm saying is, what you want to be able to do is tune into the sensations and allow the actual sensation, not your story, but the actual sensations to relax with them. Like anger. Anger is a common experience. I was angry on that Bank of America call. I go, wow, this is interesting. It feels really hot here. And it feels like energized hot. That's not that bad of a sensation. My story about it is horrible. But, in this moment, that I can welcome that thing. As I welcome that sensation, it changed. And I was able to let go of the story, let go of the sensations, and I started to feel more peaceful, because now I'm entering into a realm called the peaceful present. And I'm not saying that you like the sensations, but if you can allow them to be as they are in that moment, it changes your relationship and allows things to move through. It's like normally we're like a stopped up toilet. Nothing's getting through, it's all stuck. And when you allow things to be as they are, it is like roto-rooter and allows things to move through. And then when you consciously say, okay, I'm wanting control here, I have no control here, or I'm wanting separation here, I really want to feel like this person did me wrong, which they probably did. Could I let go of needing that story just for 10 seconds? Maybe not, it might be too big. There are stories that I have that are too big to let go of. So you might work with smaller stuff. But 10 seconds, yeah, I could let go for 10 seconds. It'll be right there when I come back. And you learn that you can let go of even big stuff for a short period of time. But it does take, these are ways to get through layers, to get out of story, into the sensations, into welcoming what's happening in this precise second, trying to let that go, a whole category, and then possibly filling it with something else. But I wouldn't suggest that you start with something this huge. This is a 10. Don't start with a 10. Just like when I go to the gym, I want to lift 500 pounds. Because I can't lift 500 pounds. I can lift 20 pounds, so I do that. And then soon I can lift 50 pounds, and then I can lift 100 pounds. And now I can lift 200 pounds. So that's a better way of doing it. And it is like a muscle that if you exercise the letting go muscle, first you learn to let go, and then you learn to let go into something. And the thing you're letting go into is present time awareness, bliss, consciousness, what the Eastern people would call Satchitananda. Bliss, awareness, consciousness. But that takes time. But every time you make a step in the right direction, you're putting kind of money in the bank into this other skill. Yeah.
I've been thinking about this. I have a really hard time welcoming some of the things I deal with.
Yeah, and that will make them stay a really long time.
I could accept them for 20 seconds. Will that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't welcome them.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because different people really relate to a different term. So I'm going to throw out some different terms here that might help you as to what relationship you want to have with this stuff. One word is welcome. Another word is accept. Another word is allow. Another word is love. Another word you can come up with your own word. But those are the most common words. And they allow the stuff to move through because, if you're like this, that's a way to make it really stuck for a long time. Great question. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, this isn't really a question, but it's something that I noticed, which was when you said now go to something or someone that you love and imagine the experience with them, then that really moved me into another place. And
Yeah.
now, when I'm remembering that, like when I go to the negative, but I'm remembering that, it makes me feel more peaceful. So
Great.
that's a replacing of yeah.
So that worked for you. The opening exercise. First you're trying to not be a ball of dense rock.
Right.
And then you want to be a little bit transparent. And then you want to not just be transparent, you want to actually be open.
Yeah.
And if you can experience that the first time you do it, think of what will happen if you can do that with 40 practice sessions. Get better at it. Yeah.
Why do you think that people in general tend to stick to or cling to these negative and problematic stories? Why is it just more natural to let them go? Why hang with them? Just for a sense of control?
Okay. Well, it's an interesting question why we stick to these stories. I could give a perspective. I don't know the answer. Why do people take heroin and do all the addictive things that we do? I think to some extent that there's a spiritual gravity, and it's easier to hold on than it is to let go. One, we don't have a good technique for letting go, so it's actually a lot easier to hold on. That gives us a sense of security. So we don't have a method, we don't have a concept that's good. We're not taught in this culture. There are cultures that do teach us, and they are much better at it. But I think also that holding on takes on momentum, and to some extent, letting go is like putting on the brakes. And that initially gets about 10 seconds of resistance. And we're not used to 10 seconds of resistance. After those 10 seconds of resistance, then you go, oh, this feels so much better. But at first we're kind of we're turning around from running, and that can be a little bit difficult. Yeah.
Something that just keeps coming to mind this last little bit is the relationship of pure awareness with the experience of being in love or being in a relationship with someone who is still telling their story of trauma about their past partner.
Yeah.
Where your heart can be really open and excited to be very present with them, but they are stuck in that trauma of heartache or sadness, and so you can't connect in a present moment of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was thinking that as you were working through your emotion of this big thing, where it's robbing you of your love connection to yourself or your source, or not you necessarily specifically, but us when we are living in that trauma moment, because we're not connecting that openness to love. I don't know, it just was coming to mind.
Well, that's what we're all doing all the time, is we're trying to get something somewhere in the future, and I have bad news for you. There is no future. You will never live a single second of your entire life in the future. It has never existed. So we're trying to, get something in a place that does not actually exist. There's only now. Your whole life is a moment, series of now moments. So letting go of this future quest and being with what is and deepening your relationship with what is, even if it's painful, even if it's unpleasant, is a doorway to gain closer to the peace and awareness, which is the container of everything. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven's within. It's always there. It's not in some other place. Yeah.
So you said there's other cultures or places that this is taught. Where is that?
Well, like when I was in India or Nepal or Tibet, they have much more of an understanding of this. You know, they don't have as much control, for one thing. Nothing really works in any of those countries. And they go, you know, the Tibetans are like, you know, the bus has a flat tire, it's not going to go anywhere. They just laugh. Ah! You know. And they just like, yeah, you know, oh well. Yeah.
I wanted to bring up one of my stories.
A little bit louder.
One of my stories is I don't make enough money, so when my car needs repaired, I go to YouTube and then I like cry for a minute and then I end up fixing it. So what I noticed was eventually I had noticed I can meet the challenge. I do fix it.
Yeah.
You know, and the stuff I can't fix. But the stuff I do fix, I finally realized, why was I crying? Why was I whining? Because I have to take, it's a larger process. It's a little more time consuming.
Well, our stories we love to tell our stories. You know,
For me.
yeah, no, we love that. I mean, that worked as a 2-year-old. You know, that's how we got attention.
But I came up with my empowering story.
That's even better. Yes, yes.
Look at me.
That's even better when you can do it.
My neighbors are like, whoa,
But
could never do that.
But stories have momentum, and we like to tell them, and we like to wallow in them, and we're good at that. We don't have to work on that wing of the plane. That wing of the plane is doing fine. We have to work on the other wing where we let go of our stories so we can experience the peace underneath it that's always there.
But why has that happened?
Why?
That happened to me. Why was it so terrible at first? Oh, just horrible.
We get great joy from telling our terrible stories. Why do we go to horror movies? You know, it makes us feel alive. Oh, you think your life is bad, but, you know, mine's worse. We do that. It really doesn't matter why.
Could it be I inherited it? Could it possibly, what entertains my mind something, could I have inherited that attitude from somebody I was around growing up?
Sure, yeah. It comes from our upbringing, it comes from our DNA, it comes from all these things, but it no longer serves us. So if you were to, and we have to start bringing this to a close, any questions about the technique that we haven't covered? I do want to mention that I will be here next week as well with my 1-second technique, that's the one I use the most. And we'll probably cover a couple methods. You're welcome to invite friends or whatever. And also I do have a donation basket. All the money goes to the Red Cross. So feel free to give some money in that orange bowl over there. But I do want to say that it's important that you practice this, because without the practice, you don't develop that muscle enough. And it's not easy. The methods are pretty easy, but we're like in this very powerful, fast-moving stream. A friend of mine used to call it the mechanical stream, a fast-moving river. And if you don't practice how to get to the other shore, you'll just be swept downstream. You know, the stories have a lot of momentum. You'll go in the stories, you'll believe them. You're not around a lot of people that when you tell your story go, huh, that's a ridiculous story. How long have you been telling that one to yourself? I mean, somebody like that would no longer be your friend, probably. So we need to practice these methods. And so I have a connection with the thing upstairs. the big cheese. I made a deal. I said, I'm going to give this sacred method to people, these 2 sacred methods to people. But what you have to do is make sure that they have plenty of material to work with this week. So I want you to throw them like Bank America employees, like the one or phone calls like the one I had, and cars that break down, and old friends that are being rude. Just throw a bunch of those things. Nothing too big, but just those annoyances at a pretty quick pace. And that will be a reminder to you that God is helping you by giving you these things so that you can practice growing this muscle. God is good, right? So you'll get plenty of opportunities. I would suggest you carry the sheet around with you because it's going to take building that muscle. And if nothing else, do a very shorthand version of just go, ugh. Okay, can I let this go just for 20 seconds? Just do that. But with practice, it can really change your life. And that could be a lot of fun. So I want to do a very brief letting go moment now. So again, to your best meditation posture. I'll be around after this for a while to answer any questions. But right now, whatever you're experiencing, think of one of your identities, like, who you are. I'm a certain job or something. And my job is to tell you, whoever you think you are right now, that's not you. So think of another identity. Oh, I got this great story of my uniquely screwed suffering. And I'm here to tell you, that's not you. And you're probably feeling something, maybe some discomfort in your body. That's not you. Maybe you think you're a man or a woman. That's not you. Maybe you're thinking that you're a certain age. That's not you. In this moment, you are a being receiving certain sensations and sounds. You're hearing a voice coming out of a field of silence, but that voice is really heard inside you. You're feeling sensations, the chair, maybe other sensations. And what's aware of those sounds or sensations? Before your judgments and thoughts. That's just simple awareness. It's always in the background. And as you become aware of that awareness, you will feel more and more peace. So your body is in a field of sensations. Sounds, whether they be cars or my voice or people coughing, are coming out of a field of silence. And awareness is aware and is that field. You can't get away from it. You can't not be aware. And as you relax, all your stories, all your thoughts, all your identities, in this moment, you might just feel pure, simple peace and awareness. And all you have to do is get in touch with that for the rest of your life and you'll be happy.